climb inside the Panther tank, a cramped steel coffin wrapped in 45 tons of armor. The air tastes of oil and fear. Your hands rest on cold controls that respond like molasses in winter, while the Maybach engine growls behind you, a beast as unpredictable as the war itself. They called it Germany's superior tank, the weapon meant to dominate every battlefield. Yet for many crews, it was a machine that betrayed them before they ever met the enemy. December 1944. The Ardennes forest lies silent under snow. American crews crouch inside their Sherman tanks, staring into the fog as Panthers prowl forward, predators of steel and smoke. Every man knows the numbers. The Panther's 75mm Quack 42 liters divided by 70 could kill a Sherman long before the Americans could return fire. But in war, numbers can lie. This is the story of two tanks, one engineered to perfection, the other engineered to win a war. Which proved mightier, the flawless machine that broke itself, or the imperfect one that never stopped moving? Long before the Panther tank thundered through the Ardennes, its story began with fear. In the summer of 1941, German forces invading the Soviet Union met a nightmare they hadn't expected: the T-34. Fast, deadly, and brilliantly simple, the Soviet tank stunned the Wehrmacht. It forced German engineers to confront a brutal truth. Their prized Panzer III and IV were already obsolete. In November 1941, a special design committee was formed, the Panther Commission. Their mission: create a tank that could outgun and outlast the T-34. By May 1942, Mann's proposal was chosen. Production began in January 1943. On paper, the Panther was a masterpiece: 45 tons of sloped armor, an 80mm glacis angled at 55 degrees, and the fearsome 75mm Quack 42 liters divided by 70 cannon capable of piercing Allied tanks from over 2,000 meters. But what the blueprints didn't show was how fragile perfection could be. From the very first deployment at Kursk in July 1943, reality hit hard. Dozens of Panthers burned before they reached the front lines. Engine fires, transmission seizures, final drives exploding under strain. Hitler's demand for more armor and a heavier gun had pushed the design far beyond what its drivetrain could bear. The Panther was born too heavy for its own bones. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American engineers followed a different philosophy. The M4 Sherman wasn't built to be the best tank, it was built to be the most reliable. Simpler to produce, easier to repair, and light enough for transport across oceans, it embodied American industrial logic. Good enough in every area that mattered most for total war. By late 1943, these two design worlds were on a collision course. Germany's quest for technical supremacy met America's doctrine of mass production and combined arms. One pursued the ideal machine, the other built a system to win wars. The battlefield would decide which philosophy would endure and which would vanish in smoke and steel. December 1944. The Ardennes forest was frozen, silent, and waiting. Through the fog rolled the German Panthers' 45 tons of steel predators, slicing through snow and pine. Their arrival shattered the quiet like thunder. Inside the Shermans, American crews braced themselves. Every man knew the legend. One Panther could destroy 5 Shermans, but legends die fast in real combat. The Battle of the Bulge was not fought on open plains where long-range gunnery could rule. It was fought in forests, villages, and narrow roads where vision was measured in yards, not miles. The Panther's long, quick 42 liters, divided by 70 gun and thick frontal armor, gave it terrifying power if it could move, if it could see, if it didn't break. But those ifs became fatal. The final drives groaned under the weight. Engines overheated. Tracks froze in snow and mud. Many Panthers were abandoned with full fuel tanks and cold engines, not defeated by the enemy, but by their own design. The Shermans fought differently. Lighter, faster to start, easier to maneuver. They worked in teams with infantry, artillery, and air support. Their turrets turned on electric motors independent of engine speed, giving them a priceless edge in close-range encounters. In forest ambushes, the Shermans struck from the flanks fast, coordinated, and deadly. At Arracourt in September 1944, that difference became clear. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams and his 37th Tank Battalion met newly arrived Panther units head-on. On paper, the battle was hopeless. 14 Shermans lost against 55 German tanks, destroyed. But Abrams understood something the German commanders didn't. Tanks don't fight alone. His Shermans fought with artillery spotting, infantry cover, and the chaos of fog. Outnumbered but coordinated, they turned the Panther's precision weapon into a liability. Every battle told the same story. The Panther tank was a marvel when it worked, a disaster when it didn't. The Sherman tank was ordinary until you looked at the results. One was engineered for perfection, the other was engineered for endurance. And in the winter woods of the Ardennes, endurance won. For all its promise, the Panther's downfall came not from enemy fire, but from within its own gears. Beneath its sloped armor lurked a fatal weakness, the final drive. French engineers who studied captured Panthers after the war discovered that these crucial components lasted, on average, just 150 kilometers before failure. 100 miles! Then, the tank became a 45-ton paperweight. German documents told the same story. In March 1944, field reports listed 13 final drive replacements in only 30 Panthers within a single month. By January 1945, more than 370 defective drives awaited replacement. The cause was simple and devastating. The Panther's drivetrain had been designed for a 35-ton vehicle. Hitler's demand for heavier armor turned it into a mechanical contradiction, a tank too heavy for its own heart. The Maybach HL-230 engine, though powerful on paper, was fragile in practice. Fuel leaks, cracked cylinder heads, and oil fires plagued the machine. During its debut at Kursk, entire companies burned before reaching the front lines. Even when derated to lower RPMs, average engine life rarely exceeded 1,000 kilometers. A Sherman's power pack could run 5 times that distance and be replaced in the field within a single afternoon. Maintenance crews dreaded the Panther. Changing an engine required cranes, special tools, and luck. Accessing inner road wheels meant removing half the suspension. In mud or frost, the interleaved wheels froze solid, trapping tanks in place. American crews, by contrast, could replace a Sherman's tracks in hours using standard tools carried in every platoon. The difference was systemic. One design demanded perfection, the other expected imperfection and planned around it. By late 1944, the results were undeniable. Fewer than half of all Panthers reported to frontline units were operational at any given time. Spare parts were scarce, fuel was scarcer. Abandoned Panthers lined the roads of France and Belgium intact but useless, monuments to over-engineering. The Sherman's simplicity had become its secret weapon. Each destroyed tank could be replaced. Each damaged tank could be repaired. Every lesson learned was folded back into the system wet ammunition storage. Improved armor, better crew safety. The Panther might have dominated a single duel, but the Sherman dominated the war of endurance. When the dust settled, it wasn't the tank with thicker armor that defined victory. It was the one that could keep moving. By early 1945, the debate had already reached the highest levels of command. Reports of Sherman losses in Europe filled letters home and headlines across the Atlantic. American tankers called their vehicles Ronsons. They lit every time. The New York Times' Hanson Baldwin questioned whether America's armor was truly adequate for the job. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, weary but pragmatic, asked his division commanders for honest assessments. Their replies were frank. The Panther tank had better guns, better optics, and better armor. Yet Eisenhower's response was swift. He forwarded their concerns to General Marshall, but the war was already turning. By the time anyone could act, the outcome had been decided not by design tables, but by logistics. Across the Atlantic, Britain and France conducted their own investigations. The British rebuilt 9 Panthers after the war for trials. Everyone broke down before testing could finish. Their final report called the tank mechanically unreliable, a polite understatement. France went further. Its 1,947 study, Le Panther, documented catastrophic drivetrain failures, chronic overheating, and maintenance nightmares. The truly weak spot, it concluded, is the final drive. Meanwhile, Soviet crews driving American-supplied Sherman tanks on the Eastern Front wrote of a completely different experience. It drove like a car, recalled Colonel Dmitry Loza. Reliable, comfortable, and quiet compared to the T-34. In Israel, those same Shermans rebuilt as M50S and M51S would still be fighting 30 years later against Soviet-made armor, proving that a sound foundation can outlast generations. The world had its verdict. The Panther tank dazzled historians with numbers. The Sherman tank impressed soldiers with results. One was a mechanical marvel, the other a soldier's friend. And in every post-war evaluation, reliability, not firepower, defined the line between glory and failure. The lesson was already echoing across armies worldwide. The perfect weapon means nothing if it cannot keep fighting. When the war finally ended, the evidence was scattered across Europe, burned-out hulls, frozen engines, tanks left behind on quiet country roads. Panthers, once symbols of German engineering might, now sat abandoned in ditches. The Shermans kept rolling east, engines humming, crews weary but alive. On May mornings in 1945, as American columns crossed into a ruined Berlin, they passed the carcasses of Panthers, still gleaming under the soot. The war's outcome was already written in steel. One tank had survived the numbers, the other had survived the war. The Panther represented a seductive idea that perfection wins. It was the engineer's dream, the tactician's fantasy, the propaganda poster made real. But it also represented a fatal arrogance. Believing performance on paper could overcome the realities of fuel, spare parts, and human endurance. The Sherman, in contrast, was born from humility. It did not promise supremacy, only consistency. It could be built, shipped, repaired, and trusted. And in total war, trust is the difference between survival and extinction. History delivered its verdict. 6,000 Panthers built, most lost to breakdown or abandonment. Nearly 50,000 Shermans built, thousands still running decades later. One design vanished with its empire. The other evolved into new generations that served nations across the world. Wars are not won by weapons alone. They are won by the systems that sustain them, by factories, supply chains, training schools, and the quiet competence of those who keep machines alive. The Panther tank failed because it forgot this truth. The Sherman tank prevailed because it never did. So as we look back across 80 years, the question remains, would you rather command the tank that dazzles or the one that endures? If this story reminds you of a lesson, history has taught too many times that reliability, not perfection, defines victory. Share your thoughts below, because even now, the battle between brilliance and practicality continues in every design that follows. These are not just stories of war, but stories of life refusing to surrender. Subscribe to WW2 Tales of Survival and leave a comment about what survival means to you after hearing this story.